welcome back to another official Narrative Assassin update video with your host, yours truly, Hussein Hill. Great to be back with you guys once again. Haven't done an update video in about a week, I believe. I released, the last video you guys saw on both Rumble and YouTube was a live footage of the Old North Patriots speaking event that I did beginning of last month, which I will briefly cover in this update video. It went pretty well. But this is a long overdue update video, and before I guess we're going to kind of slide into logistics before we get into the general topic of this update video. I've said before in the past, I'm trying to get back to, for those of you who are new to the Narrative Assassin brand and videos and channels, etc., these update videos were meant to serve as in-between small snippet videos in lieu of large-scale episodes, and I stopped doing large-scale episodes approximately towards the end of the 24 election cycle. I did say I want to get back to doing large-scale, we'll say long-scale or long-form episodes with a very long intro and a very, and a proper outro. But honestly, the update videos are working pretty well. So I think the update videos will just be the format for the show indefinitely, and then if I decide to scale it out going forward, that will happen. But so that's, I guess, a bit of the formal logistics. I also delayed an update video because I was working on a recent op-ed, which should definitely be out either Sunday of this upcoming weekend or Monday of next week. And it's detailing a lot to do with what we're going to discuss today in this video about the failures of the right wing in 2026 America. Besides that, everything else is trucking along pretty well. And of course, before we get into this very contentious subject matter of this update video, please be sure to go into replies and follow me either on Rumble, or actually follow me on both Rumble and YouTube. Follow me on X. Follow the Narrative Assassin Hussein Hill account on X. Follow the Old North Patriots account on X, which is an organization I'm a representative of, and the organization I did a speaking event for, as I said at the beginning of last month. And also follow the Federalist Press. That video with Old North Patriots was under the Federalist Press brand, and that's going to be sort of the format for Federalist Press videos going forward, which are also on YouTube under the Hussein Hill banner, and also a separate Federalist Press account on Rumble, so follow there. I think the format will basically be detailing and documenting live events that either I'm part of or that I'm privy to that I think are noteworthy, once again, whether it's me being involved in personally or associates of mine or noteworthy IRL events that I want to document. So, and also too, if you like the brand, make sure you go in the replies below and consider going to either buy me a copy /Hussein Hill to donate monthly, please, or go to Cash App directly for one-time donations, standalone donations at NAHHill86. Really gonna kind of lean more into the donation stuff because I'm expanding out the operations. I'm doing a lot of things now, and this stuff is not free. So with all that logistical information and coverage out of the way, let's dive into this update video. So as derived from the title of this update video, this conversation will be revolving around the absolute failures of the Republican Party and MAGA and Trump and the Trump administration and the entire Trump movement, which started, roughly speaking, between 2015 and 2016, and has now, carried on till 2026 with this second term of Trump. And as I mentioned earlier at the top of this video, I did do a Old North Patriots speaking event where I briefly, I briefly covered, or at least focused specifically on the failures of the North Carolina Republican Party and how they are an abysmal failure at representing the interests of Christian Americans, Americans of the faith. Doesn't matter if you're Catholic, Protestant, or anything of that denomination, any Christian denomination therein, or people who are right-wing, people who are nominally right-wing, people who are nationalists, people who are populists, people who care about truly putting America first. And this video is going to expand that out to the national stage. And this video is going to be a lot harsher because I will say I specifically tried to strike a conciliatory tone during that speaking event. I tried to strike a very amicable tone because, quite frankly, and I will kind of delve more into this as the video progresses. It really gives me and many others no pleasure to come to the realization or to tell people out in the ether, the audience, you guys, that the Republican Party and the institutional right is wholly inadequate, and in many ways is the enemy of the American people. As I detailed in that speaking event for Old North Patriots, I point out the specific failures of the North Carolina GOP with regards to the ridiculous 2024 Republican Party National Convention, where they had a keynote speaker who was an active pornographer. We had Indians. They ended the prayer, so to speak. They ended the prayers, or the first night of the event, with an Indian heretical prayer to some sort of a demon, and the entire event with people like what's that guy's name? What's that guy's name? I always forget these people's names. Shaban. What's that guy's name? Kestenbaum. Shabbos Kestenbaum or something like that. Shabbos Kestenbaum or something like that. They had Jewry all over it. The cries for supporting Israel were riddled throughout the entire RNC convention of 2024. Not to mention that the Republican Party of North Carolina specifically has done nothing for even, we'll say, boilerplate conservative positions. Things like a real full-throated defense of pro-life issues, a real full-throated defense, or rather a real meaningful attack on so-called LGBTQ legislation and the attack of the normative, we'll say, nuclear traditional family. All these things have found the wayside, specifically locally here. And we can zoom outward, and we can apply the same lens and the same issues, of course, to the National Party. And again, I do kind of briefly want to go over some things that have happened to me since my last update video. So since my last update video, and this is sort of all related tangentially, I have been banned from Lyft for a 3-year-old violation that apparently went under the radar. My Lyft usage was not interrupted. Apparently this went into my email inbox, didn't see anything from it. But apparently this 3-year-old Lyft violation, which happened ironically, or interestingly enough, the week after October 7th, where I was very passionate on social media about resisting the subsequent genocidal actions of the state of Israel, and calling out the genocide in Gaza. Because immediately after October 7th, there were calls for a complete erasure, a complete flattening of the Gaza Strip and Palestine as a whole, or the Palestinian, a complete displacement rather, an ethnic cleansing of the Palestinian people. So due to that violation, and the violation very vaguely said that while they understand that people are frustrated about, because I believe it was October 14th, 2023. They said this thing to the effect of while we know that people are frustrated with the issue happening in Gaza, we do not condone anti-Semitism. Did not cite a particular situation that I said something to a driver or that I did something with regards to actual Lyft employees. It was a vague condemnation of anti-Semitism. That's the only violation I've ever gotten on Lyft. I checked. I mean, what other violations have I got? I know I've done the thing where I've ordered a Lyft and canceled, or maybe I was a bit short or rude with a Lyft driver when they didn't drop me off in time or something, something like that. But never a violation, never a violation. And that was the only violation we found. And my Lyft account is now under suspension for that. There was also the fact that Old North Patriots released a post. I believe it was last week. If not, I think it was either Saturday. What day was it? It was sometime last week. I forget exactly, but you can go on the Old North Patriots page, account, X account, and see it. We released a post calling out sort of the Islamification of North Carolina and the Jewish chauvinism of people like Sloan Rocksmuth. I think her name is Rocksmuth or Rocksmuth. Her name, when you read it on paper, it looks like it could spell something that sounds like Rat Smith, use the insinuations as you might. Rat Smith, may sound like a particular slur relating to a particular trope of Jewish people. But Sloan Rotsmuth or Rotsmuth, whatever her name is, is a prolific Zionist Jewish apparatchik, or asset rather, in North Carolina, who has dedicated her entire career to blackmailing Christians, to threatening Christians, and to cudgeling anyone on the right wing who has opposed Israel, who has opposed Zionism, and has actually advocated for a authentic Christian America First vision in North Carolina, which would exclude the political bolstering of Jewish interests within our right-wing institutions and infrastructures here locally. So she decided, we called her out. She decided to flame out, as I knew she was going to do, and call me a foreign asset. Said that where was I born? Born in Brooklyn, New York. The Hill name goes back generations, specifically in Durham, North Carolina. Not only that, she's like, you're a Muslim? It's like, well, I'm an apostate. Like, I'm the guy, I'm fighting the Islamification of the West. I'm the guy that you should be trying to convince. I'm literally the ex-Muslim who has lost his Muslim family because of my apostatizing from the faith. And my Muslim family is none too happy about that. Very much disown me, basically. Very much disown me, and the tensions are ongoing to this very day. But, of course, for a Jewish chauvinist Zionist like Sloan, that is of little consequence. The facts of the matter are of little consequence with regards to trying to codify Jewish interests in her local right-wing sphere. And this brings us out to the broader conversation, which is someone like Sloan Rothsmuth, or Rothsmuth, or whatever you want to pronounce that Jewish bitch's name. And she is a bitch. I mean, like, I called her a Jewish bitch, and I was like, was that too much on X? But she's a bitch. Not because she necessarily is Jewish, but she happens to be a bitch who is Jewish. So that's that's an accurate description of what this woman is. But this kind of person is exactly the issue with the Republican Party. I don't think it's disputable. I don't think it's even controversial to make the claim that in 2026, the Republican Party is fully codified with Zionist Jewish interests. That is the modus operandi, the main focus of the Republican Party. And we know because nothing else that the Republican Party has promised us for generations, and or the MAGA movement via Trump promised us from 2016 till 2026, has come to fruition. We have no border wall, which was a promise by the Trump administration. We have no meaningful restriction of immigration. Once again, there's this massive debate. It's been going on ever since the beginning of Trump's first term, whether or not Trump is actually making good on the deportation numbers. The fact of the matter is, and everyone knows this, he is not. So much so that the DHS stopped reporting the numbers, specifically in November 2024, and all we've gotten are sporadic, vague reports from ICE. And these sporadic, vague reports, and this has been confirmed by multiple sources, do not seem to actually conclude any real significant deportations or even really a trackable trend of deportations, but rather a way to sort of reinsure or keep dangling the carrot in front of the figurative carrot in front of the MAGA constituency to keep them on board with the Trump movement. So there is no meaningful mass deportations. That hasn't happened. We haven't seen an end to new foreign wars. As a matter of fact, we've seen a continuation of foreign wars. We still see the continuation with the Ukraine and Russia conflict. We saw the complete leveling and decimation of the Gaza Strip and the complete displacement of the Palestinians. And now, courtesy of the Trump administration, we have the war with Iran. A new, fresh war with Iran, of which there seems to be no foreseeable end to. And the administration has signaled that there is no defined or no certain end to. Now, you can make the argument, and I think it's a relatively salient one if you'd like to make it, perhaps the Trump administration and perhaps the American federal government, right? You can make the claim that DC specifically that their intent was to go in and go out, a surgical decimation of a target with regards to Iran and the Iranian regime, and then a quick removal, much like it did in Venezuela. That hasn't happened. As a matter of fact, ever since we began this conflict with Iran, which occurred, roughly speaking, last weekend, I believe it was Saturday of last weekend, ever since we've seen this, I think it was Friday or Saturday, it was over the weekend, it was like very early Saturday morning. Ever since last weekend, with the Iranian strikes, or the strikes against Iran via the U.S. and Israel. We've seen an acceleration of rhetoric from the White House, from the Department of War, from all the different apparatchiks and all the different assets and shills of the Trump administration is saying that we are going to continue this operation until they have successfully neutralized the Iranian regime or what have you. And there's even talks about moving from the Iranian regime and moving to targets like Turkey, for example. There's a very vague, a deliberately vague projection for how long this particular operation will continue. And I even said in a previous update video when covering the Venezuelan decapitation efforts by the administration that I do believe that there's a case to be made, and I think the case has been made at this point, that the Venezuelan decapitation, while not a true regime change, number one, and number two, in and of itself, if we were to isolate it in and of itself as a particular operation in the interest of America with regards to America's, we'll say, particular sphere of influence, one can make the argument that within that context was we'll say relatively benign and in many cases benevolent or beneficial rather to the American international interest. However, I also made the claim that operation was probably used as a pretext or as a test run or a proof of concept to prep or condition the Trump base in the idea of other international ventures, of other war and military ventures within the context of quote unquote Western expansionism. And of course, what entity in the world benefits from ravenous, aggressive Western expansionism, particularly in the Middle East? It's of course Israel. And so now we have this situation where the one thing that people like Nicholas J. Fuentes, people like the broader America First movement in the form of the Grapers, people that I support, people like Jake Shields, list all the names, all the people that stood against that were rabidly anti-Zionist post October 7th, all the people that were crying out not to vote for Trump leading up to the 2024 victory of the Trump campaign. You now have the thing that we said was going to happen, that war with Iran was a possibility. It was very much on the table. We now have that in full play. What else haven't we gotten from the Trump administration? What else have we gotten, and what have we gotten, rather? What are the other things that we haven't gotten? So we've broken the promise of no more foreign wars. Okay, we've gotten that. We've also saw during the 24 election cycle that the Trump campaign, not maybe specifically Trump himself, but the Trump campaign was hostile during the 24 election cycle against rabid advocates for pro-life, saying that if you were trying to push the administration or pressure the administration to take a more hardline stance on pro-life, a fundamental, we'll say, intergenerational right-wing cause, one that's shared and has been spearheaded specifically by Catholics and many Protestant groups, many Christians of the Catholic and Protestant distribution. I say, if you look at the actual numbers on this, the Catholics have been spearheading the pro-life cause for a few decades. You saw that during the election cycle 24, they were scoffed at. I did nonprofit work, and I did political campaigning work on behalf of a pro-life organization. And we had a team meeting where the head of the organization, the national chair, she basically freaked out at Trump. She said, this is a betrayal. You told us that you wouldn't be necessarily a hardliner, but you told us you wouldn't counter-signal us. You wouldn't try to hinder us from advocating for our interests with regards to pro-life causes. That's out the window as well, too. And we can even go down the line again on a national stage. More boilerplate issues. Again, the Republican Party in general, whether it be Trump, and you can't really lay this at the feet of Trump because this was never really in the purview of the MAGA movement per se, although you could argue that because the MAGA movement did try to appeal to Christians and nationalists, there was sort of like a insinuation that this might be on the table, but again, there was no clear declaration of this. But the Republican Party, on the other hand, has claimed to try to fight for this for years. The issue of gay marriage, repealing gay marriage, tackling the issue of LGBTQ, LGBTQ indoctrination and curriculum in our schools, LGBTQ legislation that fundamentally threatens the stability of the traditional normative American family. And then you have people in the Trump administration saying, oh, well, we're tackling transgenderism. And when they say they're tackling transgenderism, what they mean is we are tackling transgenderism up until the age of 9 with parental consent. You can't transition. You cannot engage in a beastly, ghastly operation that clearly is a sign of psychological and sexual disorientation only if you are 9 years old with your parents' consent. So that's out the window. The Republican Party, and this has been a conversation, I guess, that precedes it precedes specifically the iteration of the GOP after World War II. The Republican Party has been the mainstay for things like feminism, for first wave feminism. Again, going back to the conversation of the pro-life movement and the hindrances there, everyone that knows, and anyone that's in the know who's worked for these pro-life GOP adjacent organizations know for a fact that the pro-life movement is largely, if not exclusively, led by women. And we have people in office, we have women in office who basically use a feminist disposition and a feminist sort of standpoint to agitate for the particular political aggrandizement. So, for example, you had Marjorie Taylor Greene, right? And kudos to her with regards to her and Thomas Massey being a part of the pressure to push for further transparency on the Epstein files, which we will get to in a few minutes. But even Marjorie Taylor Greene, her entire appeal about doing that was not because we need to discuss, international blackmail via this wealthy, bizarrely, this mysteriously self-made wealthy Jew who used the sexual proclivities of high-powered American politicians and people of influence and of elite status as blackmail on behalf of the state of Israel. No, not that at all. It's because we have to tackle the rampant abuse of women. It's a conversation of sexism and powerful men and powerful men abusing women. It's basically the Me Too. It's the Me Too for the GOP. It's MAGA Me Too. And on the conversation of the Epstein files, what did we see with that? We saw Trump specifically come out and dismiss any real concerns about revealing the Epstein files. And in many ways, people try to give the America First movement Nick Fuentes, even people like myself, because I support them. I've made jokes. I've actually shocks. Full disclosure, I've ordered. It is in the mail. I've ordered a Nick Fuentes homage USA quarter zip. It is en route to my residence, and I'll be wearing it for my casual Friday Spaces. By the way, don't forget to not miss the Wednesday and Friday Spaces on X They're scheduled for 7:30 p.m. Eastern, but roughly it's 7:30 to 8:30. That's the starting time. But make sure to be there. This video is going to be released probably around either today's the Thursday the 5th, so Thursday evening, very late, or most likely Friday morning. So if you're going to miss the show, the show was moved from Wednesday to Thursday this week for scheduling reasons, but whatever, you're going to miss that. But check the Friday show out between 7:30 and 8:30 p.m. Eastern on Friday. But nonetheless, they try to give people like us crap for, making light of the conversation, making jokes of the Epstein stuff. Epstein's got Aura, we're rocking the quarter zips. But it's the hilarity of it all, the irony of it all is like we're the only coalition, we're the only group of people in the political discussion bringing ardent and explicit attention to the reality of the Epstein file. And the reality of the Epstein files is Jewish subversion, Jewish manipulation at the highest levels of American life, at the highest levels of American political and cultural and economic influence. So we saw the Trump administration bury that and cudgel the would-be diehard Trump supporters, any of which decide to speak out for the transparency, for the complete disclosure of these files. And now we have a few, I think the last we had was about at least 3 million unredacted files, with many redacted files still at large. At least 3 million more. I think there's 6 million were released, 6 million were declassified or something, and 3 million were shown to the public, and there's like 3 million on the back burner. Still not the full disclosure, still a lot of questions, still don't really know. So that's out the window. So the idea of draining the swamp under Trump, that's gone. That's completely gone. Trump is the swamp. MAGA is the swamp. MAGA is involved with the burgeoning technocratic elites of so-called little tech, with Elon Musk and J.D. Vance and Vivek Ramaswamy and Peter Thiel and all the rest. The Trump administration works hand in glove with Palantir, which is a glorified spy and surveillance network military-grade surveillance network surveilling and archiving American citizens, putting some of them on potential lists for domestic terrorism if they do in fact show hostility towards the regime's interests. All of this under the Trump administration. All of this under the GOP. And so the real question, ladies and gentlemen, is what do we do going forward? Right? Because there's a lot of conversations going on. And I'm going to be very honest with you. I have yet to decide if I will vote Democrat in the midterms. I'm probably not going to. And we'll kind of get into that briefly. But I've yet to decide that. And the reason why, let's address it on the face of it, is because I'm right-wing. And because I'm Catholic. And because for years I have been targeted politically, rhetorically, and in some cases, yes, multiple times, once even this year, actually, violently by the activistic left. So there is no love lost for me with the political left. There is no love lost for me for the cultural left. I am a far-right actor. I'm a Catholic. I'm a nationalist. I'm a white majoritarian. Sloan, going back to Sloan Rochsmith or whatever her name is, Sloan, the Jewish shill, the Jewish Zionist freak Sloan. She took a clip out of one of my videos you can only really see on Rumble at this point, one of my more recent videos, where I talk about I reference the fact that I have used hyperbolic statements, and which I will use again, and I've actually said the same thing on these videos here on YouTube. Things about we need white primacy, we need white majoritarianism. One might call it something akin to white supremacy actualizing itself in the imagination of Americans, which is to say, to be very clear, not calling for cruelty or violent cudgeling or destruction of non-whites, merely a society that starts to understand intergenerationally that the core racial and ethnic makeup and identity of this nation is of European extraction, is of the European character, and should be revered and should be bolstered as such, right? So I'm not someone that falls nicely into the left. I really never have. The closest I ever did was when I was in my late teens, early 20s. I was like an anarchist or something. I was like a right-leaning anarchist. That was as far as I ever went. But I still hated hippies. I still hated commies. I didn't like communists. I didn't like hippies. And I still fundamentally knew I was American. But I'm not a leftist. However, and also as well, it must be known that people like me, we not only sat out the 2024 election, we advocated viciously and aggressively on social media for others to do the same. With that said, here's a case why voting for Democrat may not be a terrible option. If you frame it like this. And I'm actually going to do something that I don't really do on these update videos, but I'll do it right now. I'll read from my phone because I want to read this specifically. I'll read from my phone. It's a quote tweet. It's a requote tweet rather that I did of a Steven Crowder post. It's regarding the recent incident with the one Brian McGinnis, the Marine that was tackled and removed from a Senate hearing regarding war with Iran and trying to push legislation to restrain the Trump administration from engaging with further operations in Iran without the proper protocols regarding congressional processes, etc. So Crowder posts this. He says, the Marine who's being held out as the only serviceman whose opinion matters is a true dyed-in-the-wool leftist. He says Brian McGinnis, is a Green Party member, donated to Jill Stein, wants reparations for black people, believes in white privilege, supports River to the Sea. And what he means by that is supports the idea of complete Palestinian and Islamic caliphate expansion and domination of that Middle Eastern region. Okay. So I requoted, and I said this would be remotely significant if it weren't for the fact that the Republican Party supports the following: Zionist Jewish supremacy, conservative LGBTQ, which is to say that you can be pro-homosexual, ahomosexual, advocate for homosexuality, so as long as you vote Republican. Legal mass migration in the form of the H-1B visa programs and the advocacy for, we'll say, high-skilled Indian immigrants to line the the positions and the open positions in these various tech companies that are ran by the little tech oligarchs, and just like low-skilled legal immigration as well. First-wave feminism, we touched them on earlier, that the Republican Party has no problem with feminism, has no problem with bolstering the idea of feminism, this complete bizarre skewing of like traditional roles, having women in office, women domineering over men, framing every issue, even the issue of killing unborn children as a woman's issue as opposed to like, a Catholic Christian human issue. IVF, in vitro fertilization, which is a mortal sin in the Catholic Church, by the way, and a complete, for the exception of people with a very small percentage of the population, with people who have, women specifically, who are born with defects that prohibit them from having children. The vast majority of this is a complete abomination and perversion of the natural processes to which they have children. The allowance of early term abortion, again, the Republican Party does make concessions all the time, on allowing early stages of abortion with parental advising and circumstantial issues with regards to single motherhood and fell through the cracks and all this. And of course, multiculturalism, where you see people, even here in North Carolina, you have the NC GOP willfully propping up candidates who are Muslim, willfully propping up candidates who are Indian Hindus. So that's the GOP. And the reason to break that down is to basically demonstrate the reality. Stop it. Yeah, what we have in America is not a right-wing party and a left-wing party, or a conservative party and a liberal party. We have a liberal party that's becoming more and more progressive each day, and a radical left-wing party. That is the reality. Both parties are multiracialist. Both parties are pro-gay. Both parties are basically okay with abortion. One wants to fetter it to an earlier stage. One wants to expand it to, anytime, anywhere, on demand. Both parties are anti-white. Both parties cannot stop themselves from going on their platforms, going in their propaganda, going to literature, talking about the ills of white supremacy. With regards to the Republicans, it's white supremacy, anti-Semitism. We stand against white supremacy and anti-Semitism. We're an all-inclusive party here, and we don't believe that race is anything but a skin color, and Martin Luther King and all this. And then with the Democrats, it's, society. The Democrats are at least honest. They're like, America is a white nation. The West is inherently white, and for that reason, it must be destroyed. They're both ostensibly foreign. They're both internationalists, with the right wing being militantly Zionist, militantly pro-Israel, at the detriment of its own people's sovereignty and autonomy, and the left being, by and large, to a certain degree, there's a massive contingency, but shrinking, of Zionist left-wingers as well, Zionist Jews specifically, but with regards to those who are pro-Palestinian, they're in favor of the Islamic Caliphate, they're in favor of emboldening rivals of America with China and the Middle East and all these third world actors to put America in its place, to humble the American people, to create this international globalist community. They're both corporatist, and they're both fundamentally liberal. They don't care about the nation. They're anti-nationalist. They're anti-right-wing in any meaningful sense. They're anti-monarchy. Here's a hardcore conversation for the so-called right. We have the heritage Americans. I've Old North Patriots, an organization that I'm proud to represent. That term has been used on our timeline, and I'm not really allergic to the term in and of itself, but a lot of people throw that term around, heritage American. It's like, well, that's a very vague term, and if you use that term too loosely, you can actually say that Jews are heritage Americans, and you can basically say that Judeo-Christianity is basically salient, which is ridiculous because no one that actually believes, or no one that's really advocating for the heritage American conversation actually believes that this country was specifically founded for Jewish interests. Many of the Jews during the founding, they were here like in the 1600s, but many of them hid their Jewishness, and many of them were kept out of various realms of power via the colonies. Nevertheless, here's a challenge to the heritage Americans. Decentralization, democracy isn't very right-wing. It's actually classically liberal. It's actually of the European liberal tradition. Right-wing is kings. Right-wing is monarchy. Right-wing is order and authority. Neither one of these parties believes in that. So if you frame the idea that you're dealing with a liberal party and a hyper left-wing party, then it's like, okay, well, it's all the same. So then begins the question, if it's all the same, hence the conversation of the Uni-party, right? The term we're all very used to. If it's all the same, then the only conversation that actually matters is, how can I engage with this system for my own interests? How can I pressure and punish the people in charge, the oligarchs, the elites, those who control the electorate, those who dominate the electoral process? How can I pressure these people into serving my interests? That is the only question, ladies and gentlemen. The question is not, are you loyal to the Republican Party? The question is not, are you loyal to the Democrat Party? Because neither party's leadership is loyal to you. Neither party's leadership cares about you. Neither party's leadership will ever care about you. The only question that matters, again, is fundamentally, what can you do for yourself? How can you represent yourself? Voting Republican and expecting a different result isn't working for people on the right. I would even argue voting Democrat ostensibly really isn't working for people on the left either, if we're being honest. Because under the Biden administration, left-wingers that were protesting against the genocide in Palestine were targeted. Most of the targeting was being done by billionaire, liberal left-wing Jews. The decapitation of university leadership was done primarily, at least in part, by billionaire left-wing Jews. Kamala said during the DNC convention of 2024 that the Democratic Party stands unequivocally with Israel. That Israel is America's greatest ally. She said something very paltry and dismissive, like, yes, we will listen to concerns about the Palestinians and all this. But fundamentally, she made it very clear that the Democrats stand with Israel. And the Republicans obviously stand with Israel. Now, the only thing that we can say is that the Democrats have a pressure mechanism within their base. There is a large and growing portion of their base that is becoming belligerent and antagonistic to Israel. We don't have that on the right, because everyone that is of that ilk on the right is ostracized. We have it in the National Republican Party platform, basically, that if you publicly hold views to that of Nick Fuentes and the Groypers and other so-called anti-Semites, that you can be disbarred, you can be excised, you can be kicked out, removed from the Republican Party of your local state ranks. Now, many people have not followed through on that because that's ridiculous and that would just cause a huge upset. But people have tried to do this. This is a real thing. We've covered before on my X Spaces, my live weekly show there, and as well as on this Narrative Assassin update show/series. That yes, there is laws, locally, state to state, and nationally, criminalizing any political dissent against Israel, any political, and in some cases, theological and philosophical critiques of Jewry, of Judaism. This is the state of America, ladies and gentlemen. So again, I haven't made up my mind as to whether or not I will vote Democrat in the midterms, but I will not counter-signal anyone that does that. I think that people need to find novel ways now to make the Republican Party hurt. The Republican Party has failed us. If you are voting for the Republican Party blindly, you are a fool. You know, if you're lucky enough to have a James Fishback, which, by the way, I think it's safe to say that, I think I have actually said before too, that yes, I, Hussein Hill, and Narrative Assassin and the Federalist Press, we wholeheartedly endorse James Fishback as a political figure. It doesn't really mean much because I don't live in Florida, but I support him. But if you have a James Fishback type character in your local area, vote for him. If you have an America First or any America First style politicians in your area that will challenge Israel, that will challenge the Zionist right of the Republican Party, that will challenge this hegemonic, stifling, neoconservative, oligarchical, technocratic class that is running not our party necessarily. I mean, I am a Republican, but, literally like registered, but running the right wing, the institutional right wing. Anyone that will challenge them, then vote for him. I don't have that here in North Carolina. Everyone that's running for North Carolina is a Zionist. Everyone, every single one of them, on the right wing. And that's many purple to red states. So what do you do in that circumstance? Maybe the answer is vote Democrat. And don't vote Democrat because you're a leftist and the Democrats are just it now. No, it's a tool. It's an upset. We have to upset the institutional right wing. There needs to be a complete upset in the power structure of the institutional right wing. We, ladies and gentlemen, do not have power. The grassroots of the right wing does not have power. And we keep playing this game. We keep bargaining with ourselves year in and year out. You know, me and many others back in 16 and 17, we slapped on the red hat. You know, I was out there with the Proud Boys and going to free speech rallies and hanging out with MAGA people. And we were targeted violently. We lost jobs. We lost friends. And now look at what we've got. Jewish oligarchy, sex trafficking cover-ups, foreign wars abound. Oh yeah, and corporate tax cuts. Let's not forget those fucking corporate tax cuts. Those great corporate tax cuts that really, really help the working man. You know, Trump's for the working man. Trump's for the forgotten men and women of America. No, Trump has forgotten the men and women of America, actually. Trump's concerned with the men and women of Israel. More specifically, Trump's concerned with the men and women of the regime, with the government of Israel, and the men and women within the international Jewish oligarchy. That's what Trump stands for. That's what the GOP stands for. So I will say straight up, again, I am still on the fence, and I'll probably announce it either on X or maybe in an upcoming update video. I haven't decided yet, but I'm on the fence for voting Democrat in the midterms. I'll probably just not vote at all, if I'm being honest, and encourage everyone else not to vote. I know it's kind of weak, but again, I personally just can't. It's the same reason why I can't vote for Republicans, because these two entities have helped to destroy, or at least try to destroy, my life. The Democrats, for me being far right or being a nationalist in general, and the Republicans, for me being anti-Zionist and countering Jewry. Sloan, she's a kind of a joke here in North Carolina, but she's kind of tapped in. And she works with a lot of powerful Jewish groups. And the Republican Party itself of North Carolina I'm aware of the backdoor games that have been done to try to keep me out and keep me at a distance because of my views on Israel and because of my views on Jewry. My biblically sound, historically sound, and geopolitically accurate views on the state of Israel and world Jewry, by the way. So I don't really feel the need to vote for either one of these people. Fuck both of them, actually. But at the same time, because at this point, you know, as I reference a lot in my spaces, in my videos, I do come from the old school punk rock scene. The old school, you know, a subculture that is not averse to combat and aggression. Maybe it's time for some chaos. Maybe it's time for some fucking chaos. Because right now, ladies and gentlemen, this is not working. And I will say this, and I think this will land the update video here. Going forward, no matter what people choose to do, I will say that the fundamental threat facing America, it's not the Democrats, it's not the woke left, it's not the economy, it's Jewry. It is political, organized Jewry. That is what runs the Republican Party, and that is where every single left-wing ideology that you claim to hate on the right proceeds from. That is the origin of it. Feminism was bolstered specifically and intergenerationally by Jewish interests, Jewish allies of feminism. Diversity and anti-whiteism, intellectual Jewry. The anti-fascist movement via communism. Communism literally developed by Jews. The anti-racist dialectics of the civil rights and the pro-black, these were all aided and abetted by Jews. Homosexuality, promulgated by, popularized by, mainstreamed by left-wing secular Jewry. Zionism, Jewry. Hypercorporatism, this idea of this compulsion by the corporate right wing to engage in usury, Jewry. That is the number one threat, ladies and gentlemen. And until America can liberate itself from that, we will be enslaved. So the message is very clear. You may not want to vote Democrat, but fuck the Republican Party. Fuck the Jewish oligarchs that run our country. It's America first. And for all the talks we heard in a few years about free Palestine, it's time to free America. It's time to liberate America. America first, America only, and America's survival.